Vi som venter, holdt jeg på å si. Det folk løper forbi og dreper ting.
Du skriver det i general-chatten. Please wait.
Det ikke så ofte de greiene spåner heller. Og alt dødt, ser det ut som.
Ja, jeg stikker ut herfra.
Da de relic-questene ting som ikke voice-guidene, hva heter det? Har sånn AI-stemme.
Hva snakker du om? Du har ikke noe quest for relics, har du det? Det bare ting du finner.
Jeg har en druid-quest som Relics of the Torn, eller det kanskje noe annet da? Har man questlines for de greiene, de nye greiene, eller det kun når man finner?
Ja, det quests også.
Ja.
Nei, de ikke voice.
Nei. Det for nytt. Det kommer vel etter hvert sikkert. Hadde det vært litt for OP hvis det hadde vært linket direkte til den AI-motoren som hadde gjort det i real time.
Det ikke det han gjør, da?
De har gjort det på sånn semier på forhånd, tror jeg. Så, hvordan kan jeg hente deg i fest?
Bare gjorde det. Jeg tror ikke det noe vits å gjøre noe annet. Jeg greide det nesten i stad, men det var litt for mye med 2 mobs. Men ja. Det som vanskeligst å få den til å spåne.
Ja, de har i hvert fall gått classic way, for det ikke noen guide hvor det står jeg skal finne tingen.
Nei, det Citizens of Discover, og det hemmelig innviklet av de chainsa. Sånn som ene runda mi. Det krever at du... Vel, hvis du løper og prater med alle i Undercity, så vil du finne en kar som spør etter om jeg har sjelen til en innocent, og sjelen til en corrupted. Og Warlocks har jo Soul Dread, så du kanskje skjønner at den innocent, ja, kritter. Du bruker den på den da, for å mene. Det andre, det en sånn mob fra en Wanted Quest. Som du må bruke Soul Dread på når du dreper den. Hvem finner ut av det?
Nerds!
Vi greier å drepe han her også, jeg har ikke noe tekt, så... Der spånet han coiler, men han bare...
Venter på meg da. Ja. Healer. Men dere kan heale dere også, kanskje?
Bare stikker av.
Nei, jeg gir ikke å lese noen guides i hvert fall, jeg vil prøve. Recover the relics, så da ligger den sikkert et eller annet sted.
Så finner deler av den?
Nei, det står bare recover Recover the stolen relic from Bramblebine Ravin. Follow the relic's guidance etter at jeg finner den. En Druid relic.
Kan prøve å tame, nei, too far away.
Skal jeg slutte å dotte, da?
Hvorfor jeg ikke fikk lov, jeg. Nå er jeg tom på mana. Bare drep den.
Where is the relic?
For å få den der Rune of Beast Mastery, er det bare å dra og drepe den litt, eller må man gjøre noe først?
Og drepe bjørnene.
Så spawner det litt da, må du ha en quest, eller er det bare å...
Nei, det er bare å drepe dem, og så spawner det en større bjørn som du dreper.
Har du lyst til å være med bort, eller Nils?
Jeg
Jeg tror ikke det var elite, så det var bare en vanlig bjørn.
Spring, gubbjævel! Kommer en bjørn!
Han tror
Jeg tror det blir 16.
Jeg skal bare hjelpe Tore med den der serpenten hans så kommer.
Ja, nice. Men har du HS i UC fortsatt, eller har du i... Ok, for det er viktig. Jeg får bare flyte over på grunn her, så...
Ja, du må til Undercity. Det til
Er ikke det raskeste veien da? Det er i Silver Pine.
Ja, der er huset.
Ja, så jeg bare begynner å løpe, ja. Du har sikkert bikepath rett i nærheten der.
Skal vi bare drepe til den av spawnet, da?
Ja.
Litt sånn ut.
Hadde jeg hatt pet, så kunne jeg drept de greiene her alene, men jeg kan ikke ha det hvis jeg skal tame noe.
Hva? Har de fjernet den der toglyden når man tar train med en torrent?
Jeg fikk en bue. Level 10, 6
Oi.
DPS.
Støter det noen også? Hva er det verden blir?
Hvem trenger den? Er det upgrade for Tore eller Thomas, eller hvem?
Jeg tror det er upgrade for begge, men i og med at han har bow skills, så kan du sikkert ta han.
Hva er det for noe?
Du droppet en bue.
Hvordan bu da?
Heavy shortbow.
DPS. Jeg tror den der har vært en del på, men oi, her er det en.
Bare selg den, du. Går bra.
Hvor er det?
Heal meg, Jallis.
Ja, fordi jeg har den samme. Jeg kjøpte den på han. Det var en som var ganske
Men i
billig.
helvete, hvorfor feiler det der?
Kan
Det er ikke mana.
pettet mitt tanken, eller?
Jeg tror det. Men jeg skjønner ikke hvorfor han feiler da. Har han for mye HP, eller?
Jeg står og healer meg selv, jeg.
Er det noen som vet det? Hvorfor Tame Beast feiler?
Nei.
Jeg tror bare det er en sjanse for at den kan feile.
Han dodger taunten.
Altså,
Da
jeg
kan jeg
kan...
heale mer.
Jeg nesten... Nei,
Der.
det feiler han.
Synd.
Men du har nok mana-riggen til å prøve igjen når den er...
Ja.
Det er ikke sånn som Pokémon, da. Han er under halvt oppe.
Ja, det er ikke jeg vet, egentlig. Han kommer
Ja,
ganske langt. Ja, nå feiler han med en gang.
Hvor mye mana trenger du?
Fra 90.
Yukumon har nok agro.
Kan jo hende at han må være lavere HP da, jeg vet ikke.
Jeg burde vel kanskje sette pettet mitt til passiv snart.
Hvorfor det?
Jeg vet ikke, vi skal jo ikke drepe den.
Ja, sånn ja. Ja, sant
Så han begynner å få litt å hoppe nå, til jeg påstå.
Ja. Ah,
Ja, men han bare... Ja, dere kan drepe raptoren, kanskje. Han feiler med en gang. Er det et eller annet som må være feil?
Kanskje ingen kan slå på den? Kanskje det er det som er tingen?
Da
Kan
mistet
være.
jeg tanken vår, så...
Prøv å ikke slå på den, da.
Det er slow an, Nils, hvis du vil kite.
Må ikke løpe fra healeren, da. Oi, 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 oi. Ja, det er det.
Det gikk bra. Faen, spawner en raptor til, vet du.
Ok, jeg tror det er hovedsakelig fordi vi slo på den.
Men når bare pettet mitt står og prøver å...
Får løpe petten nå, da.
Hvorfor løper... Hva God.
Jeg skjønner ikke hva som skjer.
Nei, pettet mitt står på passiv nå, så hvorfor det...
Nei, det var nesten ferdig, men nei, det var...
En gang til uten å slå på den, da. Jeg vil slå
Ja,
på
nå
den
er
del
den
i
vel der,
starten.
tror jeg.
Nei, jeg stoppet å drepe den der. Men hvis jeg løper for langt nå, så får den fullt opp. Jeg vet ikke om det er meningen eller ikke.
Holder du til jeg kommer, eller?
Ja, jeg kan løpe i sirkler rundt en piller her.
Hva er det dere prøver på for noe?
Tame en sånn serpent lite.
Ja, såpass
Nei,
heftig
jeg har
å få
aldri
til.
hatt problemer med å tame noe før, men nå bare feiler det hele tiden, så jeg vet ikke hva som er gærent.
Men hvilken level er den da?
Samme som meg, 15.
Faen. Jeg fikk sagt det fra fort nok.
Men hvis bare jeg prøver å holde agro, ass.
Mhm.
Ja, det er faen.
Nei, altså...
Men var det ikke
bare
det dere
slå på
prøvde
den.
først da, og så feilet det, eller?
Nei, men hvis vi starter med at du får opp masse agro
Pet, ja.
med petten din.
Jeg har ikke pet.
Nei, men Nils.
Da kan ikke jeg bare lage litt agro på den, da, så burde ikke jeg miste agro hvis jeg tamer den.
Ok.
Ser da, spåne han til, men vi må komme oss inn til. Ja, nå er det jo masse mobs her da, så kanskje vi skal la noen andre...
Vi kan jo
Begynner
fighte
rett
oss
an, da.
litt.
Hvor mye XP da?
Er dere klare hvis jeg henter
Egentlig
han?
ikke, men
Nei, det er
er det ikke
Nei, en til her.
denne pettet mitt på meg? Kom igjen, tont. Oi. Caramba.
Har du healer deg selv med, forresten?
Nei, noen ganger bare kommer en heal. Jeg vet ikke hva.
Lol. Random heal.
Random heals, ja.
Det høres ikke dumt ut, den.
Det er ikke håp, da.
Ja, det er han.
Det er Det er jævlig
20% av damagen den gjør, eller noe healer den er for, ikke sant?
Da prøver jeg igjen.
Ja,
Ja,
eller
da skal vi bare stå og se på. Og heale Tore.
Tror druiden også healer meg nå? Nei, shamanen der.
Nå er jeg jo inne til seg selv. Faen, jeg tror på mange. Det går. Yes!
Nice. Jeg er i Silver Pine Forest nå, så Nils.
Rats. Du må gi den
Rapporte.
et
Trenger jeg
awesome navn.
fisk eller brød?
Jeg må bare finne ut hvor de der bjørnene er.
Du må gi den der et awesome name, da.
Jeg må skaffe mat der før den stikker. Da.
Hva er det du fikk? Bjørn?
Serpent.
Serpent.
Hva er det de spiser da?
Ta det akkurat. Fisk, brød eller ost. Her og harter tilbake på den der avfyren. Nei. Jeg har ikke mats eller plass til det.
Jeg flyr til Sepulture nå, hvor var Vet du hvor Silverpine er?
Hvor sa du? Til...
De bjørnene, husker du cirka, eller har du stått
Ah,
på klus?
Her er Silverpine Forest.
Ja, jeg løper bare nedover helt til jeg ser dem, for jeg vet de er langs veien et eller annet sted.
Ja, det er hva slags helst bjørner? Det er ikke noe...
Nei, det er de som heter Ferocious Grizzly Bears, eller noe sånt.
De er oppe hvis du bare løper til flightpath-stedet.
Ja, det var det jeg regnet med. Jeg er på vei dit. Jeg ser du flyr, fordi
Takk for
den
hjelpen.
farta du har, den har ikke jeg.
Har dere noe forslag til navn?
Momse-moms. Nei, det var ikke bjørn. Serpent.
Det var et helvete å gjøre det, altså.
Hva om helvete da?
Håper noe mer ærerikt.
Endelig.
Endelig, ja.
Men med 2 e-er.
Hell Serpent.
Du dypdykker i det norrøne navnet. Ferocious Grizzly Bear, det er flere av dem faktisk. Din høyre, hvis du følger den der...
Ja, ja. Må finne sted det er flere av de da, for da skal drepe de helt til det spåner en elite. Nei, jeg ser det er en
Jeg tror jeg
bak meg til og
drepte 3 eller 4 bjørner, og så spånet.
med. Ok.
Jordmundgander.
Jeg løper inn i bushen her, så ser jeg om det er noe.
Du kan kalle det for jordmundgander.
Er det aggro? Åja.
Hva er det?
Sa det at-
Verdensormen?
Midgard, nesten teknisk sett Serpent.
Så skriver man det.
Jordmund ga G-A-N-D-R, er det ikke det?
Jeg vet ikke.
Ok, her fant jeg en bjørn, men det er noen som dreper den.
Jeg også fant bjørn, men de er jo døde alle sammen. Det er i hvert fall masse bjørner i det området.
Jeg fikk Fury of Storm Rage.
Det viktigste er å få... Oi, vi er jo langt unna hverandre, Nils. Jeg er fortsatt sørover, jeg. Jeg trenger egentlig løpe og ta den der flight patten, men det er litt risky da, hvis han spåner. Burde få tagga den hvis den spåner. Nå er det en bjørn
Åh,
bak meg.
god, er det.
Jeg løper og tar flight patten, og så kommer jeg bort til deg.
Faktisk der oppe. Det er vel der jeg spåner. Jeg løper inn
Du
i
har jo fullt liv.
Ja, men det er sånn, de der Son of Argo, det er sånne eliter som bare roamer
Ja.
rundt og gjør livet ditt surt.
De er nice.
Hva enn da?
De tokene gjør på en måte sånn at vi blir litt mer sånn som de forskjellige heltene in-game, da. Sånne skills.
Da kommer jeg opp til deg, Nils. Eller løper mot deg i hvert fall.
Hvilket quest er det du trenger da?
Sa du det? Tore?
Trenger du noen quests her?
Jeg har masse quester. Har du plass i inventoren din nå, eller?
Ja,
Jeg har jo en masse quester i min level.
takk.
Jeg skal ta og gå litt AFK for å rydde litt.
What?
Det er en bjørn, det er to. Nei, det er en bjørn her ved meg.
Den gjør sånn at Wrath...
Her på.
Jeg kan bruke Wrath-spillen gratis nå. Det var ikke... Jeg skjønner hvorfor de sa det var Boomkin-spekk.
Da er vel noen som løper rett inn på den der eliten. Nå får de brenn.
Det spåna ikke noe.
Det blir det.
Håper de nye dungeonene blir lagd for å prøve å kontre alle nye abilitiesene folk får, da. Sånn at det blir litt utfordring.
Nei, jeg er rett bak deg, Nils.
Ja, og da går vi unna, for der er den eliten den slakta akkurat et tomannsparty som trodde det var
Oi.
vanlig mobb.
Ok. Vi kødder ikke med han. Skal vi se, løpe litt sørover, da. Og nå spåna det en bjørn rett bak her, da. Ja, der var den eliten, ja. Her, jeg har tagget den her nå.
Jeg kan ikke kaste de greiene på andres ting.
Spåna.
Hvilke greier?
Runes på andres klær.
Det har jeg aldri prøvd. Det måtte jo være noen fra egen klasse i alle fall, minimum. Jeg tror ikke det, fordi det blir soulbound på deg i tillegg.
Ja, det er sant.
Det er 3 bjørner.
Adventurer, how may I
There,
further your
sorry,
training
I'm
in the eyes of the Earth
thank
Mother? Adventurer, how may I further your training in the eyes of the Earth Mother?
Nei. Ja, det er 3 bjørner.
How may I aid you?
Skjønner at det er ingen som selger skinning knife her, da. Helvete.
Hvor er den der eliten spåneren, da? Bare
This
sånn
is quite
plutselig.
alarming indeed.
Det er en
But
til
with the
elite
separatists,
rett her
call on
oppe.
our brethren from Bloodhoof Village to help thwart the attack. You have saved the lives of many Tauren
Elite eller
adventurers.
bjørn?
Nei, elite. Jeg mener til bjørn.
Greetings.
Jeg har ikke sett noe til elite enda. Her er den her. Jeg tagget den.
Der, nå følte jeg meg blind.
Oi.
Skjønner meg bugga, jeg får ikke sett hva ting heter.
Jeg droppet en bow igjen, faktisk. Skal vi se. Jeg ser ikke noe bjørner i nærheten. Jo, rett frem her. 2 til.
Be careful.
Greetings.
Det er godt mulig dere må være i Silver Pine Forest også. Da. Det
Ja, vi er der.
Vi er i Silverpoint. Ja.
We shall meet again.
En til her.
As the wind on the plains, you are always
Det er
welcome.
en til. Rett frem her.
Go in peace.
Ah, nice.
I can train you in first aid techniques.
Bare ta bort han her.
Winds be at your back.
Det er 2 bjørner til rett her nede.
Han andre var...
Litt til venstre bare.
Need to restart my session because I can't see.
En til her.
Ja, skal bare ta den her Earth Root.
I think there's a mob that is interfering.
Ok, det daua pettet mitt. Jeg vet ikke helt hvor det løp, og så bare disbanda det.
Så. Nå ser jeg ingen andre inn her.
Nå får jeg skrive den.
Nice. Skal vi løpe tilbake samme veien som vi kommer, eller skal vi fortsette nedover? Hva er du mest trua på? Fortsette nedover, kanskje?
Vi kan prøve litt nedover. Jeg vet det ikke er noe opp til venstre, for det er en sånn gruve med bare de der Borgen-sakene.
Oi, der er noe som heter Giant Grizzly Bear. Det er vel noe annet.
Det høres ut som noe vi må drepe.
Vi skal... Ja, det er flere bjørner her. Men jeg er på denne siden av veien.
Er det feil type bjørn?
Ja, i hvert fall følge han her som jeg ser på nettet, så står at vi må drepe 70 ferocious.
Da er vi nok kanskje litt lært.
Men det er flere av de... Nei, det er det ikke.
Det er kanskje noen oppe til...
Det er en her.
Ja, for ellers så tror jeg det er noen oppi der også.
Ja, ingenting der. Jeg kan se de på minimappen.
Ja, helt oppi andre siden av ridgen.
Ja, det kan jo hende. Men jeg kunne ikke se noe på kartet.
Det er Trade Skill Master som kødda til med sånn at jeg ikke kunne se navnene på items.
Det er en der.
En add-on?
Ja. Sånn man kan se pris på ting man selger og sånn. Eller har i inventoryen. Så hvis du besøker... Jeg må kanskje besøke en sånn auction house først for å få oppdatert prisene på alt.
Gå nå den. Ja.
Så vet man hva som er verdt å ta vare på. Hvis man oppdaterer den jevnlig, så er det lettere.
Ja.
Hvis vi måtte drepe en del her da, før det skjedde noe. Gå nå en der nå. En her.
Det er ikke mye bear meat på de bjørnene, altså.
Nei, da spåner det en til. Mammabjørn var ikke så veldig glad i de ungene her. Nå spåner den rett bak oss.
Det er oppe på andre siden, eller helt nord. Det er sånn delfin. Det er liksom spåner masse gnolls, og så skal du drepe gnolls til den der mobben spåner da.
Ja.
Det var 2 femmannsgrupper som bare sleia alt som var der i sånn 6-7 minutter før den spåner.
Jeg håper det er sånn. Ja. Det var mye bjørn inni den skaven her. Det var ikke så mye players heller, så det var... Der er vi. Ulver rundt omkring.
Vi kan sjekke om ene greia om questet mitt er oppe og går. Det er rett oppe i bakken. Det var bugga i stad. Kan vi gjøre det sånn? Det er her den der rebuild som er sak.
Ja, nettopp. 2 for en smekk. Ja, det er 2 til her. Andre er der, og så er det en der, og så er det en der nå. Det er 2 stykker, jeg tar de 2 her borte. Sender petten på han ene, og så... Kite. når den der liten spåner, står det noe tekst eller et eller annet? Ja, ok, så vi blir attacka med en gang, så det er ikke sånn at vi kan oversette den. Der er en der, Nils, rett over gata. 3 kills, sa du? Hvor mange er vi på, Nils? 20?
Ja, noe sånt.
Bjørn, eller hva det er.
Det er de her som i hvert fall står vi skal drepe på nettet. Det er en til her. Nei, den der
Kanskje jeg
var.
hadde flaks, jeg vet ikke.
Løper over inn i her igjen. Aha,
Det var ikke et sånn spesifikt sted i Silver Pine, det var bare sånn i Silver
Nei,
Pine.
det står bare i Silver Pine Forest, kill ferocious grizzly bear until grizzly protector is summoned. Det er en her.
Kanskje det er 1% sjanse da, for er dere
Det
dreper at den
et eller annet sånt, ja, at det er sånn 2% sjanse eller noe. Så kan den ha flaks, og det kan ta litt tid. Oi, den der kan du ta, Nils. Peace Bloom. Her er det 3 til, faktisk. Prøv å tagge alle sammen. En petten på han, en dot sånn. Prøv. Da er det en til der. Sånn, jeg har alle sammen kommet mot deg. Det hjalp litt med ny bås. Gjør fort litt mer skade.
Ja, bra.
Ja, med tanke på at jeg har hatt en båen jeg startet med 12 leveler, så jeg forventer ikke at det er noe nytt med det første.
Så det er ikke noen som liksom crafter noe...
Nei.
Jeg føler den der Magic One jeg kjøpte på AO, den er like bra som spill.
Value.
Ja, absolutt. Sånn 27 så selv, og så er det 17,5 level.
Den er ganske drøy. Du må stå wham og gjøre mer skade enn det jeg gjør med...
Ja, det er bare sånn spill jeg bare ikke bruker noe. Et dopp der, og så vannet.
Nei, ikke noe her. Skal vi sjekke andre siden. Nei. Der er det.
Litt sånn random, eller hva var det?
Det kan hende det var... Jeg så det var et eller annet, men...
Kan være sånn loyalty level, da
Åja,
Ah,
ja, det kan det ha vært.
som man lever.
Det kan det ha vært. Jeg synes det var litt sånn lysere farge. Nei. Jeg så det bare i sidesiden. Ja. Jeg løper over til andre siden igjen, ja. The good spot. Kanskje jeg spawnet noen der nå. Der nede er i hvert fall en. Kom igjen da, spawn. Nå kom det en til der. Og en der. Jeg kan ta denne siden av veien.
Ja, ta den på høyre.
Ja.
Det var det.
Ja, det er-
så
ja.
jeg tror det.
Ja, jeg har tatt av begge to. Åh. Må lage en makro for å få petten til å angripe når jeg skyter.
him out of range. It's too far away.
Spåne på om det ser hva jeg med henter.
I need more prairie. Oh, no, yeah.
Ja, nei, en der og en der. Jeg kan ta den her, hvis du tar den på andre siden av veien.
Og det var den dungeon i...
Stormwind, var det ikke det?
Nå...
Ja, den er. Ja, hva heter den som er i Stormwind da?
Stockhead? Er det...
Ja.
Ja, stemmer. Det var noe på S i hvert fall. Ja, det er en her. Så henter den, så løper vi andre veien igjen, for det var ikke nedover her, så ble det jo også den andre bjørn.
Ja. Det var perverslav...
Jeg forventet at vi skulle vært ferdig nå, Klass.
Hva heter det?
En rune? Det er ikke...
Hva heter Rune?
Rune heter Beast Mastery.
Ja, men den grad dropper. Det er sånn grønn greie som dropper.
Heter den ikke Rune of Beast Mastery eller noe?
Beast Mastery Rune Gloves?
Ja. Eller er det...
Ja, det skal være kill for Ocean. Det er jo Silverpoint Forest, så det var 16 sammen.
Jeg tror vi er på sporet, altså.
Men du kunne gjort det her i Barents også.
Ja, kunne man?
Ja, just north of Camp Rayo, there's a patrolling cheetah that has a speed buff. In order to remove this buff, you must drop a trap on his path. Once the buff has been removed, you can kill it and loot the rune.
Jeg
Det er for det samme runen?
Feller før level 16 og sånn.
Ah, ok. Ja, nei, da er det her riktig sted, så det måtte være.
Nei, i hvert fall for den som jeg ser på, så er det bare her som er lista. Oi, her er det en bjørn på den siden av veien, så er det 3 bjørner foran meg her nå. Du tenker han... Jeg har litt lyst til å...
Var det fella litt?
Jeg har egentlig lyst til å tame en sånn bjørn, jeg, men... Kan du gjøre det etter at den har droppet?
Det er agra 1. Her.
You need talents.
It's too far away.
Oi, her kom den! Her kom den, for faen meg. Jeg får ikke tagge han. Har du tagget han, eller? Jesus. Han var for nærme. Tok sin tid. Kom det en annen nå?
Ja, snakk om in your face når du spåner.
Ja, det var veldig. Altså, full inventory. Nice. Da blir petten litt bedre. Nå skal jeg dismisse den petten her, så skal jeg teime en bjørn.
Åh, du er ikke lei av dem? Du er ikke lei av bjørner? Etter å ha drept...
Jeg vet ikke, jeg liker de som pets. Føles så tanky.
Ja. Du burde kunne finne en på en nett til den grunnen.
Ja.
Så spiser vel bjørner alt mulig rart også?
Jeg er faktisk ikke en bjørn her. Jeg kan jo bare... Jeg må bare abandone den der jeg har her. Abandon, ok. Den er rett. Den er rett her oppe. Skal vi se... Oi, den er level 12 og det er jo perfekt. Der begynner jeg bare.
Da trenger ikke jeg å angripe den, for den...
Ja, vi får se, jeg håper ikke det. Med mindre jeg feiler og den dreper meg da. Hva som skjer her nå? Nå er det en idiot som driver og dreper bjørnen! Det skjer hele tida!
Ja,
Spitt på han her, altså. Idiot.
Problemet er, det er helt idiotisk egentlig da, men den abilityen din, den tagger ikke dyret.
Ja, jeg vet det. Jeg må skyte først da. Tagge, og så... Der er en på andre siden av veien her.
Vi lyster seg ikke da, folk prøver å ta et dyr, og så...
Den er tagget.
Da bør det bli sånn at
det er en der. Ja, jeg vet det, men jeg får bare skyte et skudd på den først da.
Ja, jeg kan sette 15 på tank.
Ja, gjør det.
På den, og så kan du sette fast.
Det er en her, bare slå på fort, bare få aggron, fordi han har kødden som driver og tar det han også. Sånn da, jeg skjøt den på noe som er fint spill, sånn.
Han taunter en av hvert øyeblikk.
Nei, nå feilet den der... Nå var ikke nok mana, eller?
Nei, men bare...
Nei, hva skjedde? Det er nok vanskelig siden den samme levelsen, men nå var ikke nok mana til å... Koster halvparten av manaen min.
Tame?
Hæ?
Koster halvparten av manaen å tame?
Ja.
Oi.
Jeg må bare svare på en telefon. Hold av. Ja. Det er 1 minutt på meg før jeg må gå ut. Det er en bjørn bak oss, bare ikke lever den til. Hva skjer? Den feiler jo seriøst etter 1 sekund.
Jeg tror det er sånn at ingen kan slå på den, eller du må aggro. Hvis jeg skjønte det riktig fra min.
Ok, nå er jeg aggro, skal vi se. Jeg ser problemet at jeg dauer før den. Ja, det ser sånn ut.
Jeg også skjønte ikke det greiene der, men i hvert fall det...
Får ikke touch den, Nils. Nei, nei.
Det beste er egentlig å bruke distracting shot og få litt aggro på den før du begynner å tame.
Ja, men jeg fikk den.
Dette burde det bestemmer deg da.
Ja, altså.
Skal vi tenke den der rekker vi det? Med gruva.
Gått med en gang.
That spell isn't ready yet.
Sånn, vet du, da har jeg fått meg en gun og lært meg å bruke den der.
Hvor er det du får...
Bare en sånn jævla fot igjen.
That's still recharging.
Ja. Jeg må gå ut igjen.
En bag til. Nice.
Jeg bare håser det.
Det er noenlunde safe her.
Trophy soup og enda med fri.
Ja, jeg bare muter enn så lenge. Jeg kommer straks tilbake og slår.
Ja, du kommer tilbake?
Jeg tror jeg må skru av, men ja.
Vi snakkes.
Vi snakkes.
Ha det. kan bare drepe alt mulig rart da, som jeg kommer over på Expo. Hello, Teddy. Moo, yeah. Sadly, it seems Blizzard removed the option to use the train thingy. Oh, now it worked. Didn't earlier. Maybe it bugged.
Det var deg nå, Erik.
Hva sa du?
Level 7, ja.
Ja.
Nå begynner jeg å få medium leather.
I said it didn't work, not some guy. Because I tried it earlier, but it didn't play the emote. Jeg er snart level 8. Eller 3 bars, cirka. Men det er vel ikke, jeg får vel ikke catform på før level 20, eller var det 12? Og så finner jeg ikke hvor de selger den jævla skinning-kniven.
Ved siden av der ble treende skinning.
What? Jeg fant ikke det.
Leather supplies, eller hva faen det?
Ja, jeg så ikke kniv det. Kanskje jeg er blind. Oh, why is your text so weird? Is it chat so... That's weird. The damn heart in the chat is middle of the chat, so I can't read your message properly.
Oh, dual wield specialization rune. Holy shit.
What? Watching from San Francisco. Hello. America. Så du, Jan Ola?
Jeg har fant ut at jeg kan få dual wield specialization med shaman.
Ok.
Og det endrer på ganske mye.
Ja, for da slår du fortere?
Ja, jeg synes det er mye bedre å ha dual wield på shaman enn å løpe rundt med et one-spotten. Yeah.
Oh, you're watching from Germany, right? Aha. Didn't catch that in the beginning. No problem. Have a good day. Rest of your Sunday. Change back from Streamlabs. Confusing sounds. Or was that YouTube? I'm not sure. We should probably just stick to one platform.
Jeg har bare hentet mer drikke, men han logget da, eller?
Denne.
Thomas, ja. Sammen kom hjem.
My shorts? Oh, on YouTube, I don't have many.
Er det noen av dere som har noe som må bli gjort, holdt jeg på å si.
Jeg må bare drive og drepe sånne jævla fugler for å få føttene. Det tar litt tid.
Erik kan spare opp. Kan vi ta bossen foran?
Bosser.
Altså ikke bosser, men litt sånn...
Liter.
Nei, ikke vanskelig quest. Se om jeg finner en sånn Season of Discovery-greie med Ratchet. Det viser seg
Down amount.
jeg kan få dual specialization.
Jeg må finne skinningkniv, altså jeg kan... Kanskje jeg skal gå engineer, så kan jeg lage våpen til dere.
Du leveler ikke raskt nok.
Nei, det er sant. Dere spiller for mye.
Nei, du samler ikke ting på veien mens du quester.
Ja, fordi jeg ikke har skinning etter det nå, jeg får ikke... Hvor er det å få lært... Jeg får vel ikke lært engineering før jeg kommer til Ogromar heller, så...
Tror du kan lære engineering?
Eller... Ja...
Det er engineering i Thunderbluff.
Nei. Jo, de har vel det Thunderbluff.
What? You have done well, adventurer. I will take these and bind their power into a totem of cleansing. I have crafted the totem to cleanse the Winterhoof water well. Now, you must take it to the well and perform a cleansing ritual. You will find it to the southeast, guarded by foul goblins. This will not be an easy task, but you must do it if we are ever to use its waters again. Fortune to you, adventurer.
Han hadde ikke fått opp en... Nei, han er vel ikke online nå. Så han var syk.
Ja, hvis du kommer litt høyere level, eller vi kan jo kanskje gå VC. Hvis du healer, Alice.
VC? Det
RC det heter da.
Mener
Den
du
i Ogromar.
ok, ja.
RFC,
RFC.
KFC.
VC, det er jo Wailing Caves, det er nesten...
Det som er dritt er at det dropper jo ikke noe som er bruknes inn i den der drittinstansen.
Det kan være som er endret på det, da. Jeg vet ikke.
Ja, det er sant.
Men hovedsakelig så går du inn der for...
Southeast, is this the one? Is that...
Jeg har samlet alle for...
South... Yeah, it has to be this one.
Jeg har 2 quests der.
Du får en utenfor, og så er det 2 chains å gjøre.
Yeah, that's the correct one. Yay, finished. Can't wait to get my bear form. I think that was level 10. Eller var cat form level 12? Nei, det var kanskje 20. Cat form.
Cat form i seg selv er 15 eller noe.
Ok. Det er travel form som er 20, kanskje.
Target something first.
Stemmer det.
I'm out of range.
Fordi catform så kan jeg begynne å løpe fortere.
Trenger du hjelp med noe, Nils?
Nei, jeg fant noen jeg kunne ta noe quest med på en øy. Det er bare sånn grinder-quest som Blizzard har lagt.
Og det er lagt til sånne små greier.
Nei, det har alltid vært der, men det
Ja.
er grindy-quest.
Ja.
News of your deed reached me, Overseer. Already the beasts near the well drink from it eagerly. You have done a great thing for the land, adventurer. And you have done a great thing for the Tauren people. To create the Thunderhorn cleansing totem, you must gather the claws of the predators of the Mulgore Plains, hunt prairie stalkers for their stalker claws, and flatland cougars for their cougar claws. Then return to me.
Enda sånn der...
Prairie stalkers and flatland cougars to the east and west.
Ellers så kan jeg komme ned til deg, Erik.
Mm?
Jeg kan komme ned til deg og gjøre noe quest der.
Er ikke du for høy level her, da?
Ja, det er enkelte som er rett level.
Ok,
De er fortsatt grønne.
ok.
Level 80 quest.
Ja.
Og level 11 quest er det til med 12. Secret Burial. Det var et Erik i gruppa. Hvor da? Kan jeg ta med en skinning knife til deg?
Ja, takk.
Kjøp den på trade supplies, liksom.
Ah. Ja, jeg har vært innom den og sett. Det kan hende jeg er blind som...
Ja, den er øverst.
Hmm. Og så er jeg sharing the land med Paleman. To the south of Bloodhoof and in a cave to the west. Okay. Stalker Claws, det er... To the east and west, så må gå over hele kartet nå. Og de første, jeg føler at det er flest av de.
Ja, og så er det 2 for RFC.
Er det sånn som kan deles?
Ja, jeg tror det. Og hente dem samtidig som jeg er gjennom der nå.
A few days ago, we found a venture company caravan traveling under guard on the northern shore of Stone Bull Lake. We'd lost 2 of our number in an earlier battle, so we were quick to attack and lay waste to the caravan. We left their supply crates, thinking that our torches would destroy anything of value. But given that venture company salvagers have been spotted near the burned wagons, maybe we were wrong. Perhaps you could go to the caravan and examine the contents of the crates.
Gizzard.
I need to get closer.
Jeg føler det er ganske nice med uendelig mana.
I can't cast that yet.
Det kommer til å bli helt sjukt på bossfights. Det eneste man passer på da er aggro.
It's too far away.
Gjør rat så mye damage, da?
Ikke i forhold til fireball, men jeg kan jo konstant drepe ting da, så lenge jeg er nærme nok, liksom, så ting på samme level i hvert fall.
I hvert fall bra som quality of life improvement.
Tenker meg om, så har vel Druid uendelig mana med Wrath i retail også.
Der har alle mana.
Ja. Det kan jo alle tenke også. GTA 6-traileren kommer, var det 8. eller 6. desember. Og da fortsatt ikke rundt av 5-eren.
Du har hatt 10 år på nå.
Ja.
I'm out of range. It's too far away.
Så tenker han for meg. En cougar. Nei, jeg må ikke drepe de tullingene der. Stalker Claws, Prairie Wolf Alpha, nei. Eller teller den kanskje? Nei. Oi, da fant jeg en som heter Isle of Ursine Rage. Learn a new ability after keeping your rage in bear form at 50 or higher for 60 seconds. Nice.
Du må equippe den.
Mm?
Du må equippe den.
Ja, jeg må være level 10 først. Altså må jeg altså lære meg bear form før jeg får gjort det sånn. Hvor langt unna? Ja, jeg ser det på kartet. Her fant jeg riktig sted. Det er det å lage pinnekjøtt nå. Lukter hele huset.
It was a cold night, the type of night when frost and fog fight for domination and every sound is muffled. Binky's breath made fountains of cloud in the still air. He whinnied gently, almost apologetically, and pawed at the ground. Mort slid out of the saddle and crept up to the interface. It crackled softly. Weird shapes coruscated across it, flowing and shifting and disappearing. After some searching, he found a stick and poked it cautiously into the wall. It made strange ripples that wobbled slowly out of sight. Mort looked up as a shape drifted overhead. It was a black owl, patrolling the ditches for anything small and squeaky. It hit the wall with a splash of sparkling mist, leaving an owl-shaped ripple that grew and spread until it joined the boiling kaleidoscope. Then it vanished. Mort could see through the transparent interface, and certainly no owl reappeared on the other side. Just as he was puzzling over this, there was another soundless splash a few feet away, and the bird burst into view again, totally unconcerned, and skimmed away across the fields. Mort pulled himself together and stepped through the barrier, which was no barrier at all. It tingled. A moment later, Binky burst through after him, eyes rolling in desperation and tendrils of interface catching on his hooves. He reared up, shaking his mane like a dog to remove clinging fibres of mist, and looked at Mort beseechingly. Mort caught his
Kanskje bra navnet til hesten som døden rir på i Discworld heter Binky.
He was aware that he was in the presence of something important, but he wasn't yet quite sure what it was. There was a road running between an avenue of damp and gloomy willow trees. Mort remounted and steered Binky across the field into the dripping darkness under the branches. In the distance, he could see the lights of Stow Hellet, which really wasn't much more than a small town, and a faint glow on the edge of sight must be Stow Lat. He looked at it longingly. The barrier worried him. He could see it creeping across the field behind the trees. Mort was on the point of urging Binky back into the air when he saw the light immediately ahead of him, warm and beckoning. It was spilling from the windows of a large building set back from the road. It was probably a cheerful sort of light in any case, but in these surroundings and compared with Mort's mood, it was positively ecstatic. As he rode nearer, he saw shadows moving against it and made out a few snatches of song. It was an inn, and inside there were people having a good time, or what passed for a good time if you were a peasant who spent most of your time closely concerned with cabbages. Compared to brassicas, practically anything is fun. There were human beings in there, doing uncomplicated human things like getting drunk and forgetting the words of songs. Mort had never really felt homesick, possibly because his mind had been too occupied with other things. But he felt it now for the first time, a sort of longing, not for a place, but for a state of mind, for being just an ordinary human being with straightforward things to worry about, like money and sickness and other people. I shall have a drink, he thought, and perhaps I shall feel better. There was an open-fronted stable at one side of the main building, and he led Binky into the warm, horse-smelling darkness that already accommodated 3 other horses. As Mort unfastened the nose bag, he wondered if Death's horse felt the same way about other horses, which had rather less supernatural lifestyles. He certainly looked impressive compared to the others, which regarded him watchfully. Binky was a real horse. The blisters of the shovel handle on Mort's hands were a testimony to that. And compared to the others, he looked more real than ever. More solid, more horsey, slightly larger than life. In fact, Mort was on the verge of making an important deduction, and it is unfortunate that he was distracted as he walked across the yard to the inn's low door by the sight of the inn sign. Its artist hadn't been particularly gifted, but there was no mistaking the light or her mass of fiery hair in the portrait of the Queen's head. He sighed and pushed open the door.
Yay.
As one man, the assembled company stopped talking and stared at him with the honest rural stare that suggests that for 2 pins they'll hit you around the head with a shovel and bury your body under a compost heap at full moon. It might be worth taking another look at Mort, because he's changed a lot in the last few chapters. For example, while he still has plenty of knees and elbows about his person, they seem to have migrated to their normal places, and he no longer moves as though his joints were loosely fastened together with elastic bands. He used to look as if he knew nothing at all. Now he looks as though he knows too much. Something about his eyes suggests that he has seen things that ordinary people never see, or at least never see more than once. Something about all the rest of him suggests to the Watchers that causing an inconvenience for this boy might just be as wise as kicking a wasp's nest. In short, Mort no longer looks like something the cat brought in and then brought up. The landlord relaxed his grip on the stout blackthorn peacemaker he kept under the bar and composed his features into something resembling a cheerful, welcoming grin, although not very much.
"Evening, your lordship," he said. "What's your pleasure this cold and frosty night?"
"What?" said Mort, blinking in the light. "What it means is, what do you want to drink?" said a small, ferret-faced man sitting by the fire who was giving Mort the kind of look a butcher gives a field full of lambs. I don't know," said Mort. "Do you sell Stardrip?"
"Never heard of it, lordship."
Mort looked around at the faces watching him, illuminated by the firelight. They were the sort of people generally called the salt of the earth. In other words, they were hard, square, and bad for your health, but Mort was too preoccupied to notice. "What do people like to drink here, then?" The landlord looked sideways at his customers, a clever trick given that they were directly in front of him.
"Why, lordship, we drink scumble for preference."
"Scumble?" said Mort, failing to notice the muffled sniggers.
"Aye, lordship, made from apples. Well, mainly apples."
This seemed healthy enough to Mort. "Oh, right," he said. "A pint of scumble, then." He reached into his pocket and withdrew the bag of gold that Death had given him. It was still quite full. In the sudden hush of the inn, the faint clink of the coin sounded like the legendary brass gongs of Lesh, which can be heard far out to sea on stormy nights as the currents stir them in their drowned towers 300 fathoms below. "And please serve these gentlemen with whatever they want," he added. He was so overwhelmed by the chorus of thanks that he didn't take much notice of the fact that his new friends were served their drink in tiny, thimble-sized glasses, while his alone turned up in a large wooden mug. A lot of stories are told about scumble and how it is made out on the damp marshes according to ancient recipes handed down rather unsteadily from father to son. It's not true about the rats, or the snakeheads, or the lead shot. The one about the dead sheep is a complete fabrication. We can later rest all the variations of the one about the trouser button. But the one about not letting it come into contact with metal is absolutely true, because when the landlord flagrantly short-changed Mort and plonked the small heap of copper in a
Denne trenger jeg poachere.
immediately began to froth. Mort sniffed his drink. And
Det er kanskje et annet sted, det. Nei, der var den.
something like apples, something like autumn mornings, and quite a lot like the bottom of a log pile. Not wishing to appear disrespectful, however, he took a swig. The crowd watched him, counting under its breath. Mort felt something was being demanded of him. "Nice," he said. "Very refreshing." He took another sip. "Bit of an acquired taste," he added, "but well worth the effort, I'm sure." There were one or two mutters of discontent from the back of the crowd.
"He's been watering the scumble, that's what 'tis."
No, that's what happens if you let a drop of water touch scumble.
The landlord tried to ignore this.
"You like it?"
He said to Mort, in pretty much the same tone of voice people used when they said to St. George, "You killed a what?" "It's quite tangy," said Mort, "and sort of nutty."
"Excuse me,"
said the landlord, and gently took the mug out of Mort's hand. He sniffed at it, then wiped his eyes. He said,
"It's the right stuff, all right."
He looked at the boy with something verging on admiration. It wasn't that he'd drunk a third of a pint of scumble in itself. It was that he was still vertical and apparently alive. He handed the pot back again. It was as if Mort was being given a trophy after some incredible contest. When the boy took another mouthful, several of the watchers winced. The landlord wondered what Mort's teeth were made of, and decided it must be the same stuff as his stomach. "You're not a wizard by any chance?" he inquired, just in case. "Sorry, no. Should I be?" "I don't think so," thought the landlord. "He doesn't walk like a wizard, and anyway he isn't smoking anything." He looked at the scumble pot again.
Ferdig med den.
Something wrong about this.
Med få stalker claws, cougar claws.
He looked more solid than he should do. That was ridiculous, of course. The bar was solid, the floor was solid, the customers were as solid as you could wish for. Yet Maud, standing there, looking rather embarrassed and casually sipping a liquid you could clean spoons with, seemed to emit a particularly potent sort of solidness, an extra dimension of realness. His hair was more hairy, his clothes more clothy, his boots the epitome of bootness. It made your head ache just to look at him. However, Mort then demonstrated that he was human after all. The mug dropped from his stricken fingers and clattered on the flagstones, where the dregs of scumble started to eat its way through them. He pointed at the far wall, his mouth opening and shutting wordlessly. The regulars turned back to their conversations and games of shovel-up, reassured that things were as they should be. Mort was acting perfectly normally now. The landlord, relieved that the brew had been vindicated, reached across the bar top and patted him companionably on the shoulder. "It's all right," he said.
Vil du ta første quest du òg, kanskje? Så?
"A headache for a few weeks. Don't worry about it. A drop of scumble will see you all right again."
Vil du gjøre det første questet med cleansed et eller annet?
Ja, han stikker litt.
Ja, ok. Ja. Jeg må snart dra, ja, så begynner jeg å komme hjem. Og så er det middag.
Driver jeg hjelper sånn 3 mage her med et eller annet quest. Det bare ble sånn.
"Don't worry about it. A drop of scumble will see you all right again." It is a fact that the best remedy for a scumble hangover is a hair of the dog, although it should more accurately be called a tooth of the shark, or possibly a tread of the bulldozer. But Mort merely went on pointing and said in a trembling voice, "Can't you see? It's coming through the wall. It's coming right through the wall." "A lot of things come through the wall after your first drink of scumble. Green, hairy things, usually." "It's the mist. Can't you hear it sizzling?" "A sizzling mist, is it?" The
Ja,
landlord
nå fant jeg skinning der.
which was quite empty and unmysterious except for a few cobwebs. The urgency in Mort's voice unsettled him. He would have preferred the normal scaly monsters. A man knew where he stood with them. "It's coming right across the room. Can't you feel it?" The customers looked at one another. Mort was making them uneasy. One or two of them admitted later that they did feel something, rather like an icy tingle, but it could have been indigestion. Mort backed away and then gripped the bar. He shivered for a moment. "Look," said the landlord. "A joke's a joke, but you had a green shirt on before." The landlord looked down. There was an edge of terror in his voice. "Before what?" he quavered. To his astonishment, and before his hand could complete its surreptitious journey towards the blackthorn stick, Mort lunged across the bar and grabbed him by the apron. "You've got a green shirt, haven't you?" he said. "I saw it. It had little yellow buttons." "Well, yes, I've got 2 shirts." The landlord tried to draw himself up a little. "I'm a man of means," he added. "I just didn't wear it today." He didn't want to know how Mort knew about the buttons. Mort let him go and spun round. "They were all sitting in different places. Where's the man who was sitting by the fire?" "It's all changed." He ran out through the door and there was a muffled cry from outside. He dashed back, wild-eyed, and confronted the horrified crowd. "Who changed the sign? Someone changed the sign!" The landlord nervously ran his tongue across his lips. "After the old king died, you mean?" he said. Mort's look chilled him. The boy's eyes were 2 black pools of terror. "It's the name, I mean." It's always been the same name." said the man, looking desperately at his customers for support.
How
Isn't
may
that so, lads? The Duke said. There was a murmured chorus of agreement. Mort stared at everyone, visibly shaking. Then he turned and ran outside again. The listeners heard hoofbeats in the yard, which grew fainter and then disappeared entirely, just as though a horse had left the face of the earth. There was no sound inside the inn. Men tried to avoid one another's gaze. No one wanted to be the first to admit to seeing what he thought he had just seen. So it was left to the landlord to walk unsteadily across the room and reach out and run his fingers across the familiar, reassuring wooden surface of the door. It was solid, unbroken, everything a door should be. Everyone had seen Mort run through it 3 times. He just hadn't opened it. Binky fought for height, rising nearly vertically with his hooves thrashing the air and his breath curling away behind him like a vapour trail. Mort hung on with knees and hands and mostly with willpower, his face buried in the horse's mane. He didn't look down until the air around him was freezing and thin as workhouse gravy. Overhead, the hub lights flickered silently across the winter sky. Below, an upturned saucer, miles across, silvery in the starlight. He could see lights through it. Clouds were drifting through it. No, he watched carefully. Clouds were certainly drifting into it, and there were clouds in it. But the clouds inside were wispier and moving in a slightly different direction and, in fact, didn't seem to have much to do with the clouds outside. There was something else. Oh yes, the hub lights. They gave the night outside the ghostly hemisphere a faint green tint, but there was no sign of it under the dome. It was like looking into a piece of another world, almost identical, that had been grafted onto the disc. The weather was slightly different in there, and the lights weren't on display tonight. And the disc was resenting it, and surrounding it, and pushing it back into non-existence. Mort couldn't see it growing smaller from up here, but in his mind's ear he could hear the locust sizzle of the thing as it ground across the land, changing things back to where they should be. Reality was healing itself. Mort knew, without even having to think about it, who was at the centre of the dome. It was obvious even from here that it was centred firmly on Stowe Lat. He tried not to think what would happen when the dome had shrunk to the size of the room, and then the size of a person, and then the size of an egg. He failed. Logic would have told Mort that here was his salvation. In a day or two, the problem would solve itself. The books in the library would be right again. The world would have sprung back into shape like an elastic bandage. Logic would have told him that interfering with the process a second time around would only make things worse. Logic would have said all that, if only Logic hadn't taken the night off too. Light travels quite slowly on the disk, due to the braking effect of the huge magical field, and currently that part of the rim carrying the island of Krull was directly under the little sun's orbit, and it was, therefore, still early evening. It was also quite warm, since the rim picks up more heat and enjoys a gentle maritime climate. In fact, Krull, with a large part of what, for want of a better word, must be called its coastline, sticking out over the edge, was a fortunate island. The only native Krullians who did not appreciate this were those who didn't look where they were going, or who walked in their sleep, and, because of natural selection, there weren't very many of them anymore. All societies had their share of dropouts, but on Krull they never had a chance to drop back in again. Terpsic Mims was not a dropout. He was an angler. There is a difference. Angling is more expensive. But Terpsic was happy. He was watching a feather on a cork bob gently on the gentle reed-lined waters of the Hackroll River, and his mind was very nearly a blank. The only thing that could have disturbed his mood was actually catching a fish, because catching fish was the one thing about angling that he really dreaded. They were cold and slimy and panicky and got on his nerves, and Terpsic's nerves weren't very good. So long as he caught nothing, Terpsic Mims was one of the disc's happiest anglers, because the Hackroll River was 5 miles from his home, and therefore 5 miles from Mrs. Gladys Mims, with whom he had enjoyed 6 happy months of married life. That had been some 20 years previously. Terpsic did not pay undue heed when another angler took up station further along the bank. Of course, some fishermen might have objected to this breach of etiquette, but in Terpsic's book, anything that reduced his chance of actually catching any of the damn things was all right by him. Out of the corner of his eye, he noted that the newcomer was fly fishing, an interesting pastime which Terpsic had rejected because one spent altogether far too much time at home making the equipment.
Peace,
He had never seen fly fishing like this before. There were wet flies and there were dry flies, but this fly augured into the water with a saw-toothed whine and dragged the fish out backwards. Terpsic watched in horrified fascination as the indistinct figure behind the willow trees cast and cast again. The water boiled as the river's entire piscine population fought to get out of the way of the buzzing terror, and, unfortunately, a large and maddened pike took Terpsic's hook out of sheer confusion. One moment he was standing on the bank, and the next he was in a green, clanging gloom, bubbling his breath away and watching his life flash before his eyes, and, even in the moment of drowning, dreading the thought of watching the bit between the day of his wedding and the present. It occurred to him that Gladys would soon be a widow, which cheered him up a little bit. In fact, Terpsic had always tried to look on the bright side, and it struck him, as he sank gratefully into the silt, that from this point on, his whole life could only improve. And a hand grabbed his hair and dragged him to the surface, which was suddenly full of pain. Ghastly blue and black blotches swam in front of his eyes. His lungs were on fire. His throat was a pipe of agony. Hands, cold hands, freezing hands, hands that felt like a glove full of dice, towed him through the water and threw him down onto the bank where, after some game attempts to get on with drowning, he was eventually bullied back into what passed for his life. Terpsic didn't often get angry, because Gladys didn't hold with it, but he felt cheated. He'd been born without being consulted. He'd been married because Gladys and her father had seen to it, and the only major human achievement that was uniquely his had been rudely snatched away from him. A few seconds ago it had all been so simple. Now it was all complicated again. Not that he wanted to die, of course. The gods were very firm on the subject of suicide. He just hadn't wanted to be rescued. Through red eyes in a mask of slime and duckweed, he peered at the blurred form above him and shouted, "Why did you have to save me?" The answer worried him. He thought about it as he squelched all the way home. It sat at the back of his mind while Gladys complained about the state of his clothes. It squirreled around in his head as he sat and sneezed guiltily by the fire, because being ill was another thing Gladys didn't hold with. As he lay shivering in bed, it settled in his dreams like an iceberg. In the midst of his fever, he muttered, "What did he mean for later?" Torches flared in the city of Stolat. Whole squads of men were charged with the task of constantly renewing them. The streets glowed. The sizzling flames pushed back shadows that had been blamelessly minding their own business every night for centuries. They illuminated ancient corners where the eyes of bewildered rats glittered in the depths of their holes. They forced burglars to stay indoors. They glowed on the night mists, forming a nimbus of yellow light that blotted out the cold, high flames streaming from the hub. But mainly, they shone on the face of Princess Kelly. It was everywhere. It plastered every flat surface. Binky cantered along the glowing streets between Princess Kelly on doors, walls and gable ends. Mort gaped at posters of his beloved on every surface where workmen had been able to make paste stick. Even stranger, no one seemed to be paying them much attention. While Stolat's night knife was not as colourful and full of incident as that of Ankh-Morpork, in the same way that a wastepaper basket cannot compete with a municipal tip, the streets were nevertheless abustle with people, and shrill with the cries of hucksters, gamblers, sellers of sweetmeats, pea and thimble men, ladies of assignation, pickpockets, and the occasional honest trader who had wandered in by mistake and couldn't now raise enough money to leave. As Mort rode through them, snatches of conversation in half a dozen languages floated into his ears. With numb acceptance, he realised he could understand every one of them. He eventually dismounted and led the horse along Wall Street, searching in vain for Cutwell's house. He found it only because a lump on the nearest poster was making muffled swearing noises. He reached out gingerly and pulled aside a strip of paper. "Thanks very much," said the gargoyle door knocker. "You wouldn't credit it, would you? 1 minute life as normal, next minute a mouthful of glue." "Where's Cutwell?" "He's gone off to the palace." The knocker leered at him and winked a cast-iron eye. "Some men came and took all his stuff away."
Then some other man started pasting pictures of his girlfriend all over the place. Bastards.
It added. Mort coloured. His girlfriend? The door knocker, being of the demonic persuasion, sniggered at his tone. It sounded like fingernails being dragged over a file. Yes, it said. They seemed in a bit of a hurry, if you ask me. Mort was already up on Binky's back.
I say,
shouted the knocker at his retreating back.
I say, could you unsick me, boy?
Mort tugged on Binky's reins so hard that the horse reared and danced crazily backwards across the cobbles, then reached out and grabbed the ring of the knocker. The gargoyle looked up into his face and suddenly felt like a very frightened door knocker indeed. Mort's eyes glowed like crucibles. His expression was a furnace. His voice held enough heat to melt iron. It didn't know what he could do, but felt that it would prefer not to find out.
What did you call me?
Mort hissed. The door knocker thought quickly.
Fur?
It said.
What did you ask me to do? Unstick me?
I don't intend to.
Fine,
said the door knocker.
Fine. That's okay by me. I'll just stick around, then.
It watched Mort canter off along the street and shuddered with relief, knocking itself gently in its nervousness.
And now, squeak,
said one of the hinges.
Shut up.
Mort passed night watchmen, whose job now appeared to consist of ringing bells and shouting the name of the princess, but a little uncertainly, as if they had difficulty remembering it. He ignored them because he was listening to voices inside his head which went, "She's only met you once, you fool. Why should she bother about you? Yes, but I did save her life. That means it belongs to her, not to you. Besides, he's a wizard. So what? Wizards aren't supposed to go out with girls. They're celibate." Celibate? They're not supposed to, you know. What? Never any, you know, at all? Said the internal voice, and it sounded as if it was grinning. It's supposed to be bad for the magic, thought Mort bitterly. Funny place to keep magic. Mort was shocked. Who are you? He demanded. I'm you, Mort. Your inner self. Well, I wish I'd get out of my head. It's quite crowded enough with me in here. Fair enough, said the voice. I was only trying to help. But remember, if you ever need you, you're always around. The voice faded away. Well, thought Mort bitterly, that must have been me. I'm the only one that calls me Mort. The shock of the realisation quite obscured the fact that, while Mort had been locked into the monologue, he had ridden right through the gates of the palace. Of course, people rode through the gates of the palace every day, but most of them needed the things to be opened first. The guards on the other side were rigid with fear because they thought they had seen a ghost. They would have been far more frightened if they had known that a ghost was almost exactly what they hadn't seen. The guard outside the doors of the Great Hall had seen it happen too, but he had time to gather his wits, or such that remained, and raise his spear as Binky trotted across the courtyard.
Nei, jeg hører på lydbok.
He crowed.
Mort fra Discworld.
What goes where?
En sånn fyr som løp gjennom en port på lukka palace uten at han trengte lukke opp porten, så vaktene ble litt redde.
Hung over his dry lips and backed away. Mort slid
Han rir på hesten til døden. Han har blitt lærlingen hans.
The guard tried again, with a mixture of doggedness and suicidal stupidity that marked him for early promotion. Mort caught the spear gently and lifted it out of the way of the door. As he did so, the torchlight illuminated his face. Mort, he said softly. It should have been enough for any normal soldier, but this guard was officer material. I mean, friend or foe? He stuttered, trying to avoid Mort's gaze. Which would you prefer? He grinned. It wasn't quite the grin of his master, but it was a pretty effective grin and didn't have a trace of humour in it. The guard sagged with relief and stood aside. Pass, friend, he said. Mort strode across the hall towards the staircase that led to the royal apartments. The hall had changed a lot since he last saw it. Portraits of Kelly were everywhere. They'd even replaced the ancient and crumbling battle banners in the shadowy heights of the roof. Anyone walking through the palace would have found it impossible to go more than a few steps without seeing a portrait. Part of Mort's mind wondered why, just as another part worried about the flickering dome that was steadily closing on the city. But most of his mind was a hot and steamy glow of rage and bewilderment and jealousy. Isabel had been right, he thought. This must be love. Walk through walls, boy. He jerked his head up. Cutwell was standing at the top of the stairs. The wizard had changed a lot too, Mort thought bitterly. Perhaps not that much, though. Although he was wearing a black and white robe embroidered with sequins, although his pointy hat was a yard high and decorated with more mystic symbols than a dental chart, and although his red velvet shoes had silver buckles and toes that curled like snails, there were still a few stains on his collar and he appeared to be chewing. He watched Mort climb the stairs towards him. "Are you angry about something?" he said. "I started work, but I got rather tied up with other things. Very difficult walking through... Why are you looking at me like that? What are you doing here? I might ask you the same question. Would you like a strawberry?" Mort glanced at the small wooden punnet in the wizard's hands. "In midwinter. Actually, they're sprouts with a dash of enchantment. They taste like strawberries?" Cutwell sighed. "No, like sprouts. The spell isn't totally efficient. I thought they might cheer the princess up, but she threw them at me. Shame to waste them. Be my guest." Mort gaped at him. "She threw them at you?" "Very accurately, I'm afraid. Very strong-minded young lady." "Hi," said a voice in the back of Mort's mind. "It's you again, pointing out to yourself that the chances of the princess even contemplating, with this fellow are on the far side of remote." "Go away," thought Mort. His subconscious was worrying him. It appeared to have a direct line to parts of his body that he wanted to ignore at the moment. "Why are you here?" he said aloud. "Is it something to do with all these pictures?" "Good idea, wasn't it?" beamed Cutwell. "I'm rather proud of it myself." "Excuse me," said Mort weakly. "I've had a busy day. I think I'd like to sit down somewhere." "There's the throne room," said Cutwell. "There's no one in there at this time of night. Everyone's asleep." Mort nodded and then looked suspiciously at the young wizard. "What are you doing up then?" he said. Said Cutwell. I just thought I'd see if there was anything in the pantry." He shrugged.
There had been half a jar of elderly mayonnaise, a piece of very old cheese, and a tomato with white mould growing on it. Since during the day the pantry of the Palace of Stow Lat normally contained 15 whole stags, 100 brace of partridges, 50 hogsheads of butter, 200 jugs of hares, 75 sides of beef, 2 miles of assorted sausages, various fowls, 80 dozen eggs, several Circle C sturgeon, a vat of caviar, and an elephant's leg stuffed with olives, Cutwell had learned once again that one universal manifestation of raw natural magic throughout the universe is this, that any domestic food store raided furtively in the middle of the night always contains, no matter what its daytime inventory, half a jar of elderly mayonnaise, a piece of very old cheese, and a tomato with white mould growing on it.
Now is the time to report that Cutwell too notices that Maud, even a Mort weary with riding and lack of sleep, is somehow glowing from within, and in some strange way unconnected with size, is nevertheless larger than life. The difference is that Cutwell is, by training, a better guesser than other people, and knows that in occult matters the obvious answer is usually the wrong one. Mort can move absent-mindedly through walls and drink neat Widowmaker soberly, not because he is turning into a ghost, but because he is becoming dangerously real. In fact, as the boy stumbles while they walk along the silent corridors and steps through a marble pillar without noticing, it's obvious that the world is becoming a pretty insubstantial place from his point of view. "You just walked through a marble pillar," observed Cutwell. "How did you do it?" "Did I?" Mort looked around. The pillar looked sound enough. He poked an arm towards it and slightly bruised his elbow. "Could have sworn you did," said Cutwell. Wizards notice these things, you know. He reached into the pocket of his robe. Then have you noticed the mist dome around the country? Said Mort. Cutwell squeaked. The jar in his hand dropped and smashed on the tiles. There was the smell of slightly rancid salad dressing. Already? I don't know about already, said Mort, but there's this sort of crackling wall sliding over the land and no one else seems to worry about it, and how fast was it moving? It changes things. You saw it? How far away is it? How fast is it moving? Of course I saw it. I rode through it twice. It was like... I'm not a wizard, so why... What are you doing here, anyway? Cutwell took a deep breath. Everyone shut up! He screamed. There was silence. Then the wizard grabbed Mort's arm. Come on, he said, pulling him back along the corridor. I don't know who you are exactly, and I hope I've got time to find out one day, but something really horrible is going to happen soon, and I think you're involved somehow. Something horrible? When? That depends on how far away the interface is and how fast it's moving, said Cutwell, dragging Mort down a side passage. When they were outside a small oak door, he let go of his arm and fumbled in his pocket again, removing a small, hard piece of cheese and an unpleasantly squashy tomato. Hold these, will you? Thank you. He delved again, produced a key and unlocked the door. He's going to kill the princess, isn't it? Said Mort. Yes, said Cutwell. And then again, no. He paused with his hand on the door handle. That was pretty perspicacious of you. How did you know? Mort hesitated. She told me a very strange story, said Cutwell. I expect she did, said Mort. If it was unbelievable, it was true. You're him, are you? Death's assistant? Yes, off duty at the moment, though. Pleased to hear it. Cutwell shut the door behind them and fumbled for a candlestick. There was a pop, a flash of blue light, and a whimper. Sorry, he said, sucking his fingers. Fire spell. Never really got the hang of it. You were expecting the dome thing, weren't you? Said Mort urgently. What will happen when it closes in? The wizard sat down heavily on the remains of a bacon sandwich. I'm not exactly sure, he said. It'll be interesting to watch, but not from inside, I'm afraid. What I think will happen is that the last week will never have existed. She'll suddenly die. You don't quite understand. She will have been dead for a week. All this, he waved his hands vaguely in the air, will not have happened. The assassin will have done his job. You will have done yours. History will have healed itself. Everything will be all right. From history's point of view, that is. There really isn't any other. Mort stared out of the narrow window. He could see across the courtyard into the glowing streets outside, where a picture of the princess smiled at the sky. Tell me about the pictures, he said. That looks like some sort of wizard thing. I'm not sure if it's working. You see, people were beginning to get upset and they didn't know why, and that made it worse. Their minds were in one reality and their bodies were in another. Very unpleasant. They couldn't get used to the idea that she was still alive. They thought the pictures might be a good idea, but, you know, people just don't see what their mind tells them isn't there. I could have told you that, said Mort bitterly. Had the town cries out during the daytime, Cutwell continued. I thought that if people could come to believe in her, then this new reality could become the real one. Said Mort. He turned away from the window. What do you mean? Well, you see, I reckon that if enough people believed in her, they could change reality. It works for gods. If people stop believing in a god, he dies. If a lot of them believe in him, he grows stronger. I didn't know that. I thought gods were just gods. They don't like it talked about, said Cutwell, shuffling through the heap of books and parchments on his work table. Well, that might work for gods because they're special, said Mort. People are more solid. It would work for people. That's not true. Let's suppose you went out of here and prowled around the palace. One of the guards would probably see you and he'd think you were a thief and he'd fire his crossbow. I mean, in his reality, you'd be a thief. It wouldn't actually be true, but you'd be just as dead as if it was. Belief is powerful stuff. I'm a wizard. We know about these things. Look here. He pulled a book out of the debris in front of him and opened it at the piece of bacon he'd used as a bookmark. Mort looked over his shoulder and frowned at the curly magical writing. It moved around on the page, twisting and writhing in an attempt not to be read by a non-wizard, and the general effect was unpleasant. "What's this?" he said. "It's the Book of the Magic of Alberto Malik the Mage," said the wizard. "A sort of book of magical theory. It's not a good idea to look too hard at the words. They resent it. Look, it says here..."
It's not a good idea to look at the words because they resent it.
Together and go down and see what his nose was doing. His eyes watered. Some people like to settle down with a good book. No one in possession of a complete set of marbles would like to settle down with a book of
I don't know.
because even the individual words have a private and
Hello?
vindictive life of their own, and reading them, in short, is a kind of mental Indian wrestling. Many a young wizard has tried to read a grimoire that is too strong for him, and people who've heard the screams have found only his pointy shoes with the classic wisp of smoke coming out of them, and a book which is, perhaps, just a little fatter. Things can happen to browsers in magical libraries that make having your face pulled off by tentacled monstrosities from the dungeon dimensions seem a mere light massage by comparison. Fortunately, Cutwell had an expurgated edition, with some of the more distressing pages clamped shut, although on quiet nights he could hear the imprisoned words scritching irritably inside their prison, like a spider trapped in a matchbox. Anyone who has ever sat next to someone wearing a Walkman will be able to imagine exactly what they sounded like. "This is the bit," said Cutwell. "It says here that even gods..." "I've seen him before." "What?" Mort pointed a shaking finger at the book. "Him!" Cutwell gave him an odd look and examined the left-hand page. There was a picture of an elderly wizard holding a book and a candlestick in an attitude of near terminal dignity. "That's not part of the magic," he said testily. "That's just the author." "What does it say under the picture?" It says, if you have enjoyed this book, you may be interested in other titles by..." "No, right under the picture is what I meant." "That's easy. It's old Malik himself. Every wizard knows him. I mean, he founded the university." Cutwell chuckled. "There's a famous statue of him in the main hall, and during Rag Week once, I climbed up it and put a..." Mort stared at the picture. "Tell me," he said quietly, "did the statue have a drip on the end of its nose?" "I shouldn't think so," said Cutwell. "It was marble. But I don't know what you're getting so worked up about. Lots of people know what he looked like. He's famous." "He lived a long time ago, did he?" 2,000 years, I think. Look, I don't know why..." "I bet he didn't die, though," said Mort. "I bet he just disappeared one day, did he?" Cutwell was silent for a moment. "Funny you should say that," he said slowly. "There was a legend I heard. He got up to some weird things, they say. They say he blew himself into the dungeon dimensions while trying to perform the rite of Ashkente backwards. All they found was his hat. Tragic, really. The whole city in mourning for a day just for a hat. Wasn't even a particularly attractive hat. It had burn marks on it." "Alberto Malik," said Mort half to himself. "Well, fancy that." He drummed his fingers on the table, although the sound was surprisingly muted. "Sorry," said Cutwell. "I can't get the hang of treacle sandwiches either." "I reckon the interface is moving at a slow walking pace," said Mort, licking his fingers absent-mindedly. "Can't you stop it by magic?" Cutwell shook his head. "Not me. It'd squash me flat," he said cheerfully. "What'll happen to you when it arrives, then?" "Oh, I'll go back to living in Wall Street. I mean, I never will have left. All this won't have happened. Did you know? The cooking here is pretty good, and they do my laundry for free." "How far away did you say it was, by the way?" "About 20 miles, I guess." Cutwell rolled his eyes heavenwards and moved his lips. Eventually he said, "That means it'll arrive around midnight tomorrow, just in time for the coronation." "Whose?" "Hers. But she's queen already, isn't she?" "In a way, but officially she's not queen until she's crowned." Cutwell grinned, his face a pattern of shade in the candlelight, and added,
Zug, zug.
"If you want a way of thinking about it, then it's like the difference between stopping living and being dead. 20 minutes earlier, Mort had been feeling tired enough to take root. Now he could feel a fizzing in his blood. It was the kind of late-night frantic energy that you knew you would pay for around midday tomorrow. But for now, he felt he had to have some action, or else his muscles would snap out of sheer vitality. "I want to see her," he said. "If you can't do anything, there might be something I can do." "There's guards outside her room," said Cutwell. "I mentioned this merely as an observation. I don't imagine for 1 minute that they'll make the slightest difference." It was midnight in Ankh-Morpork, but in the great twin city, the only difference between night and day was, well, it was darker. The markets were thronged, the spectators were still thickly clustered around the whore pits. Runners-up in the city's eternal and Byzantine gang warfare drifted silently down through the chilly waters of the river with lead weights tied to their feet. Dealers in various illegal and even illogical delights plied their sidelong trade. Burglars burgled, knives flashed starlight in alleyways, astrologers started their day's work, and in the shades, a night watchman who had lost his way rang his bell and cried out, "12 o'clock and all's up!" However, the Ankh-Morpork Chamber of Commerce would not be happy at the suggestion that the only real difference between their city and a swamp is the number of legs on the alligators. And indeed, in the more select areas of Ankh, which tend to be in the hilly districts where there is a chance of a bit of wind, the nights are gentle and scented with Habasine and Cecilia blossoms. On this particular night, they were scented with saltpeter too, because it was the 10th anniversary of the accession of the patrician, and he had invited a few friends round for a drink, 500 of them in this case, and was letting off fireworks.
Ankh-Morpork had dallied with many forms of government and had ended up with that form of democracy known as one man, one vote. The patrician was the man, he had the vote.
Laughter and the occasional gurgle of passion filled the palace gardens, and the evening had just got to that interesting stage where everyone had drunk too much for their own good, but not enough actually to fall over. It is the kind of state in which one does things that one will recall with crimson shame in later life, such as blowing through a paper squeaker and laughing so much that one is sick. In fact, some 200 of the patrician's guests were now staggering and kicking their way through the serpent dance, a quaint Morporkian folkway which consisted of getting rather drunk, holding the waist of the person in front, and then wobbling and giggling uproariously in a long crocodile that wound through as many rooms as possible, preferably ones with breakables in, while kicking one leg vaguely in time with the beat, or at least in time with some other beat. This dance had gone on for half an hour and had wound through every room in the palace, picking up 2 trolls, the cook, the patrician's head torturer, 3 waiters, a burglar who happened to be passing, and a small pet swamp dragon. Somewhere around the middle of the dance was fat Lord Rodley of Quirm, heir to the fabulous Quirm estates, whose current preoccupation was with the thin fingers gripping his waist. Under its bath of alcohol, his brain kept trying to attract his attention. "I say," he called over his shoulder as they oscillated for the 10th hilarious time through the enormous kitchen. "Not so tight, please."
I am most terribly sorry.
No offence, old chap. Do I know you?
Said Lord Rodley, kicking vigorously on the backbeat.
I think it unlikely. Tell me, please, what is the meaning of this activity?
What? Shouted Lord Rodley above the sound of someone kicking in the door of a glass cabinet amid shrieks of merriment.
What is this thing that we do?
Said the voice with glacial patience.
Haven't you been to a party before? Mind the glass, by the way.
I am afraid I do not get out as much as I would like to. Please explain this. Does it have to do with sex?
Not unless we pull up sharp, old boy, if you know what I mean,
said his lordship, and nudged his unseen fellow guest with his elbow.
Ouch,
he said. A crash up ahead marked the demise of the cold buffet.
No.
What?
I do not know what you mean.
Mind the cream there, it's slippery. Look, it's just a dance, all right? You do it for fun.
Fun?
That's right. Da, kick!
There was an audible pause.
Who is this Fun?
No, fun isn't anybody. Fun is what you have.
We are having fun.
I thought I was,
said his lordship uncertainly. The voice by his ear was vaguely worrying him. It appeared to be arriving directly into his brain.
What is this fun?
This is.
To kick vigorously is fun.
Well, part of the fun's kick.
To hear loud music in hot rooms is fun.
Possibly.
How is this fun manifest?
Well, look. Either you're having fun or you're not. You don't have to ask me. You just know, all right? How did you get in here anyway?
He added.
Are you a friend of the patrician?
Let us say, he puts business my way. I felt I ought to learn something of human pleasures.
Sounds like you got a long way to go.
I know. Please excuse my lamentable ignorance. I wish only to learn. All these people, please, they are having fun?
Yes.
Then, this is fun.
I'm glad we got that sorted out. Find a chair,
snapped Lord Rodney, who was now feeling very unfunny and unpleasantly sober. A voice behind him said quietly,
This is fun. To drink excessively is fun. We are having fun. He is having fun. This is some fun. What fun?
Behind Death, the patrician's small pet swamp dragon held on grimly to the bony hips and thought, guards or no guards, next time we pass an open window, I'm going to run like buggery. Kelly sat bolt upright in bed. Don't move another step, she said. Guards?
We can stop him,
said the first guard.
I'm gonna...
Shamefacedly
Jeg logger av nå.
I just pushed in,
said the other guard from the other side of the doorway.
And the wizard said it was all right, and we were told everyone must listen to him because...
All right, all right. People could get murdered around here, said Kelly testily, and put the crossbow back on the bedside table without, unfortunately, operating the safety catch. There was a click, the thwack of sinew against metal, a zip of air and a groan. The groan came from Cutwell. Mort spun round to him. Are you all right? He said. Did it hit you? No, said the wizard weakly. No, it didn't. How do you feel? Bit tired. Why? Oh, nothing. Nothing. No drafts anywhere? No slight leaking feelings? No, why? Oh, nothing, nothing. Cutwell turned and looked closely at the wall behind Mort. Aren't the dead allowed any peace? Said Kelly bitterly. I thought one thing you could be sure of when you were dead was a good night's sleep. She looked as though she had been crying. With an insight that surprised him, Mort realised that she knew this and that it was making her even angrier than before. That's not really fair, he said. I've come to help. Isn't that right, Cutwell? Said Cutwell, who had found the crossbow bolt buried in the plaster and was looking at it with deep suspicion. Oh, yes, he has. It won't work, though. Excuse me, has anyone got any string? Help, snapped Kelly. Help, if it wasn't for you. You'd still be dead, said Mort. She looked at him with her mouth open. I wouldn't know about it, though, she said. That's the worst part. I think you two had better go, said Cutwell to the guards who were trying to appear inconspicuous. But I'll have that spear, please. Thank you. Look, said Mort. I've got a horse outside. You'd be amazed. I can take you anywhere. You don't have to wait around here. You don't know much about monarchy, do you? Said Kelly. No. She means better to be a dead queen in your own castle than a live commoner somewhere else, said Cutwell, who had stuck the spear into the wall by the bolt and was trying to sight along it. Wouldn't work, anyway. Dome isn't centered on the palace. It's centered on her. On who? Said Kelly. Her voice could have kept milk fresh for a month. On Her Highness, said Cutwell automatically, squinting along the shaft. Don't you forget it. I won't forget it, but that's not the point, said the wizard.
I can train
He pulled
you
the
in first
bolt
aid
out of the
techniques.
plaster and tested the point with his
May the
finger.
eternal sun
But if you
shine
stay here,
upon
you'll
you.
die, said Mort. Then I shall have to show the disc how a queen can die.
You wish to speak?
What? Not getting rested?
As the wind on the plains, you are always welcome here. Looking for something special?
Yeah, turning off the stream, so see you maybe later. I'm gonna stream, I'm gonna play more later, so yeah, see you later, maybe.